Hey guys, well it's now 12 months, would you believe, since I started building my Bearhawk aircraft. Time for another update. Come and take a look. So I'm still working on the Bearhawk aircraft most days of the week. I have been taking a little bit of time out to go hiking, do a bit of overnight tramping in the hills, that kind of thing. Still at that stage where I've been for the last 2 months, I think, where visual progress isn't that obvious. However, the most noticeable thing that I have done is I've got the windshield up here in place. It's all ready to be permanently fixed to the aircraft. Now, that took probably about 4 or 5 days to get right. The actual trimming of the windshield, not really a big deal. I haven't got the wings on. I didn't put the wings on. I had to talk to a friend who had recently done his, and he said, look, there's not actually a whole lot of point because you can't change the fit of the windshield. Not like the old Cessna ones. This one is made specifically for the Bearhawk. So what I did, I lifted the windshield up into position and I spent a lot of time looking at it and pondering how I was going to go about fitting it properly. You don't see it obviously here because I've got it all clamped in place, but when you first lift it into place, these sides sit quite a way off the door pillars. I did have a problem up here with the channel. It wasn't wide enough, so I spent a couple of hours widening it out in such a way that it wasn't going to be that obvious. I think I've done a reasonably good job of it. Then what I did, I realized that there was almost no trimming at all required to fit the boot cowl. It looked like there was going to be a lot, but there was actually none. I did trim probably about 1 centimeter, which is just under ½ inch, say, off each side of the windshield where it fits the door pillar. Now I've made up these little strips of aluminium that are going to cover that. They're just waiting to be painted. They'll give it quite a nice finish. And the bulk of the work was going into making this fiberglass fairing that holds the windshield in place. That probably took, I'd say, close to a week actually, all said and done. I masked off the boot cowl completely, so I had to have the boot cowl in place, but I couldn't have any clecos that were going to obstruct it. I masked it off very, very well. I've still got masking tape on the windshield there, you can see. And when I was ready to go, I started laying up fiberglass. Now I'm fairly new at using fiberglass, so I got a few pointers. And what I did is I set up my workbench and laid the fiberglass strips out there. I cut them probably about, say, 4 inches, something like that, and 4 inches by about probably 18 inches long. And I wetted them out on the workbench and then lifted them into place one at a time. And I just kept going over and over with a very slow curing fiberglass until I had about 9 layers. I had quite an issue because it's very cold down here, it's winter time, and I set up effectively a plastic tent over the windshield and put a small fan heater in there, left it to cure as much as possible, probably for about 8 hours. It still wasn't fully cured. And then I came back in the morning. It had cured enough overnight that I was able to lift it off the windshield, carry it inside and put it in a room with some serious heat going, and that cured fully then. Just taking a look around here, you can see I've managed to get a very, very good fit. I'm really happy with it. Once it's ready to go in, there's going to be a silicone in place to seal it, and I'm going to mask it all off and silicone down the sides, obviously to weatherproof it. Once I'd got this fairing made up, there was quite a lot of work in just sanding it back, filling it with some automotive lightweight body filler and sanding it over and over again for several days. Managed to get quite a good finish on it, and again it's waiting to be painted. Now I've got quite a collection of parts that are all waiting to be painted, and that's the next job on the list. The weather down here hasn't been playing ball with me for the last couple of weeks, so I've got a growing list of parts and just waiting for the weather to come right. One issue I'm facing is the temperature here, so I'm going to have to get a few probably small fan air heaters. I think I'll get 5 or 6 of them, plug them in around the garage and bring the temperature up as close as I can get to sort of 20 degrees Celsius. Another job that I did last week was I permanently mounted the boot cowl in place from here over the top to the other side. Now these bottom panels are all removable. From here down, all the way under the stainless steel tunnel is all removable. Now I don't intend to remove it very often. I'm going to actually screw it in place and seal it all up as though it's permanent. But the top part is actually permanent, and that was riveted in place. I've finished doing that yesterday or last night, and that's all been sealed with a high temperature silicone. Now, I've spent a lot of time over the last few days making these gear leg fairings. They're not the easiest thing in the world to make. To be honest, if I was doing it again, it would be something that I could do very early on in the build while I had the aircraft on a rotisserie or on a frame, and while I was able to flip it upside down. The problem is to come back and do it with fiberglass now is very difficult because you're fiberglassing upside down. I just didn't have the experience to attempt that. That said, I've managed to get quite a good finish out of the aluminium, and I'm quite pleased with it. I'll just bring the camera underneath and you'll be able to see what I've got going on there. It's all held in place by Clecos at the moment, but I am going to rivet it just here, and there'll be a couple of probably number 632 nut plates down the back. Now, earlier on in the build, a couple of months ago, I made up some trim strips to hold the polycarbonate skylight in place. I wasn't particularly happy with how they came out. I thought it could be done better. So I took a template into a sheet metal worker and got them to do this. They've made 4 strips, 2 on each side, and I've riveted 2 of them together. Now what that does is when I pull it down tight, it holds the polycarbonate skylight in place, and it also provides a flange for the wing to fuselage trim strip to sit on. Very, very happy with the workmanship. They were brilliant. The guy really knew what he was doing, and yeah, he did it for a very reasonable price too. So I'll probably be going back there to get some more work done from him. A couple of weeks ago, I ran some RTV silicone down the rear window just to seal the gap. Now I did contemplate making an aluminium fairing to seal that, and it probably would have looked quite good, but it was a very awkward place to work. I actually did try it, but you can probably see because of the fit between the door and the rear window, there wasn't a lot of room to play with. So what I actually did was I got a leaf blower onto it and a compressed air gun and had a look at what was going to happen when it got a rush of air there. And basically nothing happened. It didn't even deform, and that was with me holding the window out so it could catch some air. So in the end, I just sealed it. I masked off the inside. You can see I didn't quite manage to get sealant in everywhere, and I was a little bit cautious about trying too hard. So what I'm going to do is actually mask that off and run some black paint down there. Another thing that I did was ran the flap cables through to the pulleys. So I used a soldering iron to make the cutouts in the fabric there. It took a wee bit of time actually, because what you have to do, of course, is make sure that you've got it in the right position. And that's a big ticket item. So I used a very long needle and firstly estimated where it needed to go before poking the needle through. Confirmed that that was actually where it needed to go, and then got the soldering iron onto it. One thing I've spent quite a lot of time doing in the last couple of weeks is making up the graphics that are going to go on the instrument panel and also on the exterior of the aircraft. So the civil aviation regulations here in New Zealand state that there's some specific signage that needs to go on the aircraft. For instance, the door needs to have exit on the inside and on the outside. It needs to have a decal to show people how to operate the handle. There are certain things that need to be placarded on the instrument panel. Plus I've got my own graphics that I want to put on the outside. So I spent about an hour down with a local vinyl printer. So they've got all the graphics there, they're making them up. It's going to take a few weeks, and hopefully will coincide with getting the nose cowlings painted at my end. I'm looking forward to getting the vinyl graphics back, and they're going to come around and help me fit them. So one of the larger tasks this month was to get all the baffle seals done around the engine. So I spent a few days doing that. They're all sealed also with high temperature silicone. They're all riveted in place. It was a reasonably large job actually, but I made up some templates, just took my time, and it seems to have come out quite well. When I fit the cowling up for a trial fit, it seems to seal fairly well too, so I'm quite happy with that. I used some baffle seal on the air intake for the filtered air box, and managed to get quite a good fit with that on the exterior air intake as well. So I got the oil breather tube permanently mounted. That took quite some time actually, in many trial fittings. That's part of the Vans Air Firewall Forward kit. Obviously designed for an RV, but not a particularly good fit on the Bearhawk. I did manage to get it to fit in the end. The key to that was getting a silicone flexible hose to attach at the top here. Now the issue with that was each end of it needed to be a different size. So I went down to the local hydraulics store, and as luck would have it, they had exactly what I needed. It had perfect fit on both ends. I also ran the cable for the alternate air. Currently it's just hanging loose because I've got the filtered air box off, but I finished off the alternate air door on the filtered air box, ran it through the firewall there, and installed a knob on the instrument panel. You know, the placards that I mentioned before that are getting made up, what we're actually going to do is do a cutout that fits right over the top of all the engine controls, the radios, and all the switches. So it's going to be a little bit tricky. Fortunately, I had the file from when we made this instrument panel up, and I took that down to the vinyl guys, and they're going to put holes in it to go over the engine controls. So obviously I'm getting closer to finishing the fuselage, and so this month I spent several days going over the engine compartment, talking bolts, talking more bolts, checking everything, more cable tying, also taking off. I had used a lot of castellated nuts as temporary nuts to hold things in place. So I've taken all those off, put in permanent steel lock nuts, and there's quite a few of them. So that was quite a time-consuming job. I also went over the fuel servo here. I've used castellated nuts with split pins. There was some really good suggestions from some of you probably who wrote to me and made that suggestion. And that was something that had been on my mind, because what happened was with the Van's Firewall Ford kit, they don't have castellated nuts and split pins. They actually send steel lock nuts. I was in two minds about that. Anyway, I've removed all doubt and put the split pins in, so problem solved. Another job that I just completed yesterday was to hook up the Scat tubing for the air intakes. You can see it over there. A bit of a tight fit actually. So the lower one doesn't currently have a clamp on it, and that's because it's a removable panel, and there's every chance that I may need to take that panel off several times before the test flying starts. Now that the boot cowl is permanently in place, you can see quite clearly the opening that I've got at the top. That is a removable panel, and that will go in last. And that's the access that I have through there for the avionics racks. If I need any more access, and it would have to be a fairly large task, what that then entails is removing the engine controls, and then the whole panel hinges forward to about 90 degrees. So quite a few months ago, I had made up the rear bulkhead of the aircraft, and I made it out of corrugated plastic or core flute. It was quite a good fit and I was very happy with it, but unfortunately I had forgotten to put the screw holes in place, and it's a whole lot harder to do once you've lost access to the back. So anyway, problem solved. What I actually did is I put all the tenements in place, put screws backwards through the tenements, and pushed the panel into place to mark them, pulled it out, drilled it, and got a really good fit. The screws aren't actually in there at the moment. I'm going to probably leave it off for most of the test flying. You can see down the back here, yesterday I removed all of the empennage, took the flying wires off, put them back into the storage tube, and the empennage has gone down the road into my storage container. So that's where it's going to stay until my hangar is finished, at which point the whole fuselage and everything will go to the hangar at the airfield and be fitted permanently. I can't fit it permanently as much as I would have liked to. The problem is that it exceeds the width of what's legally allowed to be taken on the road here in New Zealand without wide load vehicles. So it's just too hard. So I'm going to take them down on the truck. And I also had a truck driver come around. He's offered me a very good rate, and he's got quite a substantial truck actually with a flat deck on it. We're going to put the Bearhawk on, probably put it on backwards actually, tie it down, and it's got about a 1 hour 15 journey down the road to its new home. Hopefully that'll happen in the next 3 or 4 weeks. So here are the engine cowls. They're waiting to be painted. I've got to scuff them up first, do a bit of etching and get them ready. The same with all of these fairings here. Those are the cowl doors there, and this is the undercowl intake. Some trim parts there, all waiting to be primed and painted, and that's probably a job for the next few days. What I also did is I went down into the wing crates and removed the wing struts, unwrapped them all, took a look at them. I've had a look at the end fittings on them. I've done a trial fit, and they all fit very, very well. So I've been checking all the bolt sizes. I've got most of the bolts here already. There are a couple that I still need to order, but the ones I've got, I've been bagging them all up. I've got basically a box sitting over there with all the final parts in it for assembly. And the problem that's occurred to me is once I start the final assembly, that's going to be able to hang it down the road, and I'm not going to have all of my tools here and all of the parts. So I've been bagging everything up, ready to go, labeling it all, and the exact number of bolts, washers, the correct sizes and everything are all in there ready to go. So that's progress at the end of 12 months. I've managed to stick at it pretty consistently. Most days I put in a couple of hours work, sometimes 3 or 4 hours. Early on in the project I was doing some quite big days, 6 to 8 hours or even longer. These days it tends to be more like perhaps 2 or 3 hours. I'll come out to the shed once or twice a day, pot around for a while, tick a few jobs off the to-do list, and then I'll go out and do something else. So for me, that's been the key to keeping the enjoyment in the project. At this stage, I think I've probably got another 2 or 3 months. I'm thinking that by the end of this month, once I get the painting done, the decals will go on. The fuselage itself will then be ready to go to the hangar, and it's just a matter of when my hangar gets finished. So there's every chance that at the next update, the Bearhawk fuselage may not be here in the shed. So once that happens, I'll bring the wings up. I'm thinking there's probably a couple of months work on the wings. I've got a little bit of fabric covering to do. There's all the painting required, fitting the fuel tanks, all that kind of thing. So that'll be quite an enjoyable change. I'm looking forward to the change there and learning some new skills. And that's one thing that's been a consistent thread throughout the project, is how much I've learned and how many different skills that I've learned as I've been going along. So there you have it, progress at the end of 1 year. Stay tuned, I'll do another update in another month's time. Thank you.